on to another Stereo Dust Particles favorite. It's Ronnie Mills. Haven't heard this in a while, have you? Certainly not on this.
What a more perfect song to play with something that I think would be fit for Stereo Dust Particles. An IBM Model M keyboard. As you may or may not remember, I had an HP EPC42 sitting over in this corner of the room for the longest time. And it was a decent computer for what I wanted to use it for. It was certainly no speed demon, but it did serve its purpose and paid for itself in more than one way. I used it as an automation device to play music. I used it as a bit of an internet radio device, and recently I've just been getting so fed up with how slow and old it has gotten. I mean, it's from 2001. It's certainly not a fast computer by any stretch of the imagination, and is relatively unusable on the modern web. And it's just an unfortunate circumstance, and of course my light. So I bought this computer in the hopes that it would be able to meet my demands, and what sold me on it was its Windows Vista sticker. No, I'm not talking about it running Windows Vista is what sold me. No, but its capability to be able to run Windows Vista usually indicates that it's powerful enough to at least run Windows 7 properly, and most likely Windows 8 and quite possibly even Windows 10. One thing I find particularly interesting about this PC is that the Dell logo is actually adjustable. So if you can put this computer in two different positions. There's the horizontal, flat, lying down on its side position that some people put the monitor on top like that. And then some people also put it in this vertical position, in the more traditional vertical position. And depending on which orientation you have it, you just stick your finger in this little tiny divot, and you can actually turn the Dell logo and make it in the correct orientation in relation to what position the computer happens to be in. So since I have it in this position, I'm going to put it back to the way it should be in, if I can. There we go. And it says 2 USB 2.0 ports. The EPC did not. It had 2 USB 1.1 ports. Yeah, definitely. Get ready to hold on to your seats, folks, because 1.1. Oh boy. We have stereo microphone and headphone jacks. The picture that was included in the listing for this PC did not show this card reader. It just showed a black plastic blank insert placed there where the card reader would have gone. And so I wasn't even expecting to get a card reader with this PC. I thought, you know, I'd have to buy one, but it actually came with one, as well as a DVD-ROM drive as well. The EPC came with only a CD-ROM drive. Here's the inside of the computer. This has a 275 watt Dell Model H27 5P-01 power supply. It's very small, and it's actually inside the computer. The EPC was a bit smaller than this computer. The external Delta AC to DC power brick that came with the EPC put out so much interference, noise, and spurious transmissions. It was an absolute mess. You could not expect to get a good Wi-Fi, TV, or even radio signal within 10 to 15 feet of that thing. It just wiped out any kind of wireless communication whatsoever. And if you put your ear up to it, you can hear a really, really prominent electrical buzzing sound. But thankfully, I don't have to worry about that any longer, because this actually has a proper internal computer power supply. We've got a 250 gigabyte Seagate Barracuda hard drive, and it is perfectly okay. I checked it out with Crystal Disk Info. Doesn't have any bad sectors. It's a relatively new drive. I think it was actually replaced within the past 2 to 3 years. It's not original to the machine. And we do have an HL data storage model GCC-T20N DVD-ROM drive, manufactured in October of 2008, so that will give us a pretty good impression and idea of when this computer was manufactured. So pretty much the same time period as my Dell Inspiron 530. The usual peripherals make their appearance on the rear of the computer. You have a SoundMax audio card, you have a line output, a line input / microphone combo jack, 6 USB 2.0 ports on the rear, one of which is being occupied by a wireless and Wi-Fi adapter, your Ethernet card. Down here is your VGA card, a parallel printer port, a serial port, and then down here is something that is even neater. Not only do we get another serial port, but we have a legacy PS2 mouse or keyboard adapter. And that leads me to my next little upgrade that I made. This is the venerable IBM Model M PS2 keyboard. I picked this up from eBay. This was actually a buy now listing with a best offer, and I actually made the seller a lowball offer. I never thought he was going to actually accept it, and to my surprise, he actually did. So it took him a few days to actually ship the item out. There were some issues, I guess, with his having to find a box that would actually fit this keyboard, but once he got it shipped out, I got it earlier today, and it was in impeccable condition, and it did come with the PS2 cord, which was nice because a few of these online do not come with the cord, and the other ones, the other Model M keyboards that I found on eBay for under $20 were the Terminal series. They were for use with a terminal computer, so they had an RJ45 connector on it, and they're next to impossible to use with a modern day computer without some kind of a complicated adapter sort of thing. I'm not all too sure, but I just decided to get a regular Model M and save myself the headache that would most likely be associated with that. And the good thing is I could use this Model M right with this computer with no PS2 to USB adapters or anything of that nature, because its PS2 port supplies enough power, 500 milliamps to be exact, which is perfect for the Model M. I was trying to use this keyboard with a PS2 to USB adapter, and it just wasn't working. The lights would light up momentarily for just a few moments, they'd turn back off, and the keyboard would act as if it were disconnected. And it turns out that that USB to PS2 adapter was just not supplying enough power to give power to the Model M to work properly. So using an actual dedicated PS2 port is the way to go, at least with these old Model M's. Now if I wanted to, I could add an external graphics card. It would have to be a low profile card, of course, to fit in here, because this does have your PCI Express 16 card slot, and then below that it also has a regular PCI card. However, you can't use that because this card here for your serial and PS2 port is taking up the available bay, so you'd actually have to remove that. So it's definitely something I would not do. I'll just use my Inspiron 530 for DV Firewire capture. And additionally, this does have 4 gigabytes of Hynix RAM, all of which checks out okay through MemTest 86. And this does not have the internal business speaker that was an added bonus. You'd have to pay for it separately if you wanted it. It would plug into this connector down here that's labeled internal speaker, and then the speaker would go right here where these perforated holes are, so as to have audio without having to hook up speakers. So here's the IBM Model M in all its glory. It works perfectly. The only problem when I received this was the seller skimped a bit on the packaging materials, and he just crammed this in a box with a few pieces of newspaper shoved amongst it and the box. And that's really not a good idea, especially with these older keyboards, because they use plastic rivets to hold the actual keyboard mechanism itself down to a metal backing plate. They get brittle over time. So thankfully nothing happened with the rivets. I checked it out, but a bunch of these function keys, at least the keycaps themselves, were all loose inside the box. So a bunch of these were just sitting around rattling around, and I was really worried. I thought that the actual keys themselves broke, that something maybe knocked up against it, or it slammed up against the side of the box, and the case of the keyboard rode up against the actual keys and knocked them out of place, and possibly cracked the actual posts that they affixed to. But that was not the case. Fortunately, they just came loose, I guess, in transit. FedEx, I guess, knocked it around a bit. Of course, all of these indicator lights for caps lock, num lock, and scroll lock work perfectly. I've done my best to obscure the view of all the wires, just because I really have an aversion to seeing wire spaghetti behind and around the desk area, especially with computers. It's very easy for the wiring situation to just get out of hand and look like an absolute total mess on the ground. So I have tucked most of them away, and if you're standing from about back here, you don't see any cables or anything there. It looks very neat. And it's perfectly capable of doing everything I throw at it, including editing full HD videos while watching a certain Stereo Dust Particles live streamer. And also, if we switch over now to Adobe Premiere, which I was using to edit a video as well, you can see it's rendering just fine. I'm surprised the fan has not kicked up. On that EPC, if you were to do anything with it, even after it was completely dusted out, the fan would kick up to tornado-like status. It was really something to behold, but this is practically silent. And now how about a demonstration of the IBM Model M keyboard sound? Now if we go over here, you can see that the wireless card is working. I got a bit worried at first because it wasn't actually downloading and installing the drivers. It had a big red X over it and it said drivers could not be installed for this, and gave me a bit of a premature scare there until I found out that they included a driver CD for a reason. Here it is. This is the, well, it has no name. It's generic USB 2.0 802, supposedly 802.11n wireless adapter, and it works just fine. However, you need to keep an eye out and keep track of the driver disk. Oh, there's my song request. It's actually playing as I'm recording this video. How ironic. So if we go to the Model M page here, it's on Wikipedia. If you scroll all the way down, it says features by part number, and it shows this chart, and if you click show, it lists practically every conceivable Model M model ever manufactured. So I cross-referenced the model that the seller had provided in his eBay listing, specifically the 1391401, and it is in fact a buckling spring, not a rubber dome version. It's manufactured by IBM. They have either AT or PS2 connections. This one happens to have the PS2 connectivity. And interestingly, after 1992, this model had drainage channels, so if you spilled something in it, it wasn't a complete goner. So if you scroll down, you can see that there are a few. Let's see if I can find one. It's not. It's going to make a liar out of me now. There we go. So you can see that there are other IBM Model M lookalikes manufactured by Lexmark that are not actually buckling spring type switches. Okay, that's some interesting scaling going on. Apparently it's taking a 16:9 video and it's only filling up the top 2/3 of the screen. That doesn't even make any sense to me. So this is running Windows 7 Home Premium, Service Pack 1. I would put Windows 7 Professional, but there's no need for it, and I don't actually have a certificate of authenticity to install it and activate it with. And don't be fooled, this is not an OEM installation by Dell. I used a little utility to make it look authentic and have all the usual OEM info that the System Properties page usually has. This is running, this has a 3.4 Windows Experience Index, an Intel Core 2 Duo E8400 running at 3 GHz, and 4 GB of RAM. Only 3.86 of that is actually usable. And of course this computer is 64-bit compatible, hence the reason why I actually installed Windows 7 64-bit on here. And to make it even a bit more authentic, I went to the trouble of adding the Dell technical support phone number, hours of operation, and website. I used to have a wireless Lenovo miniature mouse, but I took it away because it was having some weird electrical gremlins. It would just randomly, for no reason, stop functioning and working with Windows, and it would still be sending out a signal, and even if I had it placed right up against the receiver, the little wireless USB receiver that's connected to the computer's USB port, it still wouldn't work properly. And it would just randomly flicker on and off, and it was uncomfortable to use anyway. It was so small your hands were scrunched up on it because it was such a small mouse. So I'd much rather use a full-size mouse, which is exactly why I got this cheap but cheerful Logitech B100 optical USB mouse. It's scratched, it's scuffed, but it works. And you can definitely tell that this is the older IBM Model M because it has the gray IBM logo, and I believe sometime after the early to mid-90s they introduced and started using the blue IBM logo instead. I just learned that fresh installations of Windows 7 or even Windows Vista will no longer be able to use the default weather gadget. If you right-click, go into Gadgets and look for the built-in weather gadget that came with Windows Vista or 7, it says can't connect to service, and if you try to go in and manually add a location, so for example I'll go ahead and type in New York here, it says location not found, and it does that for any location you put in there, because Microsoft wants to push people into using the apps, the built-in apps for Windows 8 and 8.1, and I guess Windows 10 once it comes down the pipe. So I can't use that anymore, but thankfully the MSN weather gadget still works. But I don't know for how much longer. I'm sure as soon as they get wind that this is still working, they'll disable this one way or another as well. And just as proof that this is capable of editing full 1080i, please note that that's 1080i, not 1080p 60 frames per second video I'm talking about. Well, here's your perfect example. I just finished rendering a full HD video in Premiere, but the only problem I was having was that of stuttering video, because when you first start playing videos with this, the display is about this big for the preview of the video, and that's much too large and starts to choke up the computer. But if you shrink it to right about here, it starts to play nice and fluidly. The only other alternative would be to render the timeline each time you want to actually play it back, but that's really not possible, and it's kind of an inconvenience. Every time you just want to listen or play or make a quick edit, you don't want to have to keep rendering everything. So just make it a bit smaller, make the preview a bit smaller, and it plays just fine. Well, good news. All of you 60p enthusiasts will be glad to know that this computer can handle 720p 60p video on YouTube. And if it can handle it on YouTube through bloated Flash player, it can most certainly handle it through native media players and video editors. Look at how smooth that is. Of course, you're not going to be able to actually see how smooth it is because I'm recording this through a 480i camcorder which only records in 30 frames per second. But take my word for it, it's super smooth with no glitches or issues. So if you want 60p video, you'll have to stay stuck in 720p. But again, 1080p 60 is very demanding, even on a powerful computer. And not to mention, if you have a slower internet connection, it's going to be a no-go. So if this computer can handle 720p 60, rest assured it can handle 1080p 30p. I think Phil Collins sums it up pretty well, because I was waiting for this moment for quite a while to have an actual mechanical Model M keyboard, and my dreams have been finally fulfilled with a bit of hard work, determination, and patience. So thank you for watching, and please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you.